Welcome to the Artist Spotlight for Run Radio. My name is Trina Wilcox, and today I'm joined by Ben from the band Dealer's Choice. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Tell me a little bit about your musical journey, how you got started, how long you've been doing it, and some of the peaks and valleys that you came along across the way.
Absolutely. From a very early age, I was exposed to some awesome old classic rock music. My mother actually used to teach piano lessons while she was carrying me. So before I was even born, I was being exposed to music. She would ride about 15 kilometers on her bicycle some days to teach in town.
Oh,
And so, yeah, I was exposed to it very early on, and my dad had some old records, Dire Straits, um, Steely Dan, a lot of that good old stuff. And they got me a guitar, I think, when I was about 9. I took lessons for a couple of years, and then the playing of music kind of faded out for a while there in my teenage years. But I was always listening to it, and rock and roll was always in the background playing with everything that I did. And then I think I was around 18 or 19. I started jamming just a little bit with some friends, and I was mostly the singer. I kind of jammed a little guitar as well, but um, yeah, it was mostly just singing. I sang to myself, of course, in the shower, in the car, and all the usual places. And then one time I was at this house party, and there was this band playing, and they just knocked me out. The drummer was doing the whole Led Zeppelin, John Bonham drum solo, playing with his hands, and I just thought, wow, like if I could only do that. But of course, I'm not good enough. I'm just a shower singer, and I mess around with my friends, but really not good enough to be in a band like that. And so a year goes by, and there's the same band playing at a different house party, but this time they don't have a singer. And so there's just a microphone stand sitting there, and they said, "Does anybody want to get up and sing?" And I thought, well, I'm a couple beers in, and why don't I just go up there and make some stuff up? We didn't play any covers. Actually, I think we might have tried one cover, which didn't go very well because I didn't know the lyrics. But
right.
mostly, I just improvised lyrics and threw myself on the floor for 2 hours, and then went away from that going, okay, well, that was fun, but of course, I'm not good enough to play in the band. They was very nice of them to let me sit in, but that'll be that. And the next day, they texted me and asked if I wanted to be the singer.
Oh my goodness.
And
What were
so
you thinking? Were you super thrilled or just caught off guard in
I
disbelief?
honestly, I was extremely thrilled. It was the sort of thing where I didn't realize how much I wanted something until I had the opportunity, the chance to do it, and the universe kind of gave me that. I feel like I was a bit too afraid before that, but that really gave me a boost of confidence. And yeah, I was just more elated than anything. I kind of threw myself around the room, and I got very excited. I started writing lyrics. I was very excited for the opportunity for playing in a band. I immediately thought, okay, well, I gotta write something. I gotta bring something to the table. And so yeah, that was
That's
that. And I played in that band for a couple of years. Um, and then it sort of just died out. But there's always seems to be some coincidence or something that bridges the bands together that I'm in. So for instance, that band was kind of felt like it was kind of dying out a little bit. The energy just wasn't there anymore. Some people were not as dedicated as some of us to making the music happen. And so it was right around the time that some of us were thinking of leaving that I connected with an old friend, guitar who I kind of thought was the best around as far as guitar, very dedicated. I think, trying to think of how old we probably would have been back then. I guess he probably would have been about 20, 21. And we started talking, and it was like, well, do you want to be in a band? Do we want to make a band? Why haven't we talked about this before? I kind of didn't think that he thought that I would want to be in a band with him, and it was kind of a vice versa situation, where once we talked about it, it was like, well, we both would love to play with each other. Let's do it. And so we formed a band, and again, didn't last too long. That band was called Broadway Bombshell. We had a real blast playing, and making some music. We never recorded or released anything. We didn't release anything with the older band either. So I hadn't released any music at this point. Um, then Broadway Bombshell, the same sort of thing, fizzled out. Some people, there was some disagreements about the musical direction, and so we decided to take it our separate ways. And then I was on vacation in Soyuz, BC. It's Canada's pocket desert for any of you out there who are unfamiliar with it. But yeah, it's a beautiful place. One of my favorite spots to vacation to. And so I was on vacation for Canada Day, and a friend of mine just walks in the bar. I hadn't seen him in months because he was a guitar player for the old band, my first band that I was in called Canadian Tuxedo, and he was kind of one of the guys that I would have liked to continue to play with. And so I was like, well, what are you doing here? And he was like, well, I was driving around Chilliwack, which is our hometown, is about 4 hours away. And he's like, I just had the urge to drive up here. So I was like, you just had the urge to drive 4 hours to a Soyuz on a whim, and then at in the evening, probably 6 or 7 at night. And he said, yeah, I don't know why. I just felt like driving up here. And so we talked about it, and within about an hour, we'd agreed to form a band, and
Oh
so
my
I formed
gosh.
a band with him called Amadeus. And then tragically, it was about a year and a half later, he passed away
Oh.
in a car accident. Um, and so that was really sad. But then our old drummer from our first band and a bass player who actually used to play who was the singer of the first band before I joined,
Oh
both
my goodness.
came on board Amadeus when Matt passed away because we wanted to kind of make some music to honor his memory. And so that band got me to Dealer's Choice. When that band was breaking up, I met the guys for Dealer's Choice. They were in another local band, and I started hanging out with them. And then we all kind of liked the same music more or less. I had a very broad music range, so I kind of connected with something from each of their musical tastes. And then we decided to form Dealer's Choice, and we've been doing that ever since. There's a bit of a long-winded story there, but I always find it interesting to talk about that because there seems to be some coincidences that kind of bridged me into
Yeah,
these different bands.
absolutely. It's all in the timing. How long has Dealer's Choice been together then?
So 2019, early 2019, we met
Okay.
each other. We met each other the summer before. Their band came and played. I actually have a little music festival that I run here in Cultus Lake. I haven't run it since the pandemic, but my parents
Right.
have 20 acres of property up here, and so I have a stage and I put on some
Oh,
shows here.
neat.
And so yeah, that's how I met them. Was I brought their band up to play, and then I started hanging out with the guys, and I realized I had a lot in common with them, and so we formed. Yeah, I think we formed early 2019, and it's
So as you're, throughout your evolution of getting to this point, what were you doing music full time? What were some of the other things that maybe you did to pay the bills that I mean, a lot of people, if they're just starting, they have to come to this realization that you can't just solely do that all of the time. You're not that fortunate. So it's kind of feels good to know that you're not the only one doing all these hustles.
oh, absolutely. I think the hustle is and the working those jobs that you don't want to work. That's unfortunately that's part of being a musician and paying your dues.
Hmm.
I'm no different. I've always worked like labor jobs, so like outside work. I did landscaping. Actually, I used to work at Save On years ago when I was a kid, but for the last 10 years or so, it's been construction jobs. My current job is a road builder.
Oh,
So yeah, I'm a grader, so I go out and I basically prepping the roads for paving, prepping sidewalks. It's a lot of prep work, a lot of hand work, shovel work. Yeah, and so I've been doing that since 2018. I actually took a break. I was studying at the Nimbus School of Recording and Media up here in Vancouver for the last year. I finished in August. And then I'm about to go back to the blacktop job here shortly.
okay.
But yeah, that's
So
been my current.
do you kind of find some like when you're out doing the physical stuff, is there kind of a time for you to just kind of let music run through your mind while you're also being physical and doing that kind of work too?
Yeah. I've read. There's a great music book for all you listeners out there who are aspiring musicians. It's called "How to Make It in the New Music Business." I believe that's the correct title, by a fellow named Ari Herstand. And I read that book, and he talks a little bit about that, about if you're trying to make it in this day and age, you're going to have to work those jobs, and trying to find a job that doesn't take too much of your mental uh, capacity up, so you have room for music, both maybe while you're working the job and after you're finished the job, because some of those jobs they stick with you after you're finished,
Yes.
and they can complicate your mental focus after you're finished the job. And so I thought that was very pertinent of him to mention that, and I myself have discovered that um, during the pandemic. There was a point where I actually left BA for a bit, and I worked as a bartender.
Hmm.
And I actually found that to be much more stressful and mentally fatiguing than the road job. The road job, it was like once I kind of got into the flow of things, um, I was able to have some moments to think about music while I was on the job, even if it's like I heard something come into my head that maybe I recorded on a phone. Just I sang to myself on a phone a musical idea, or I wrote some lyrics. There was there was a bit of time to do that, and then after the job was over, I was able to leave that job behind and have mental clarity and focus afterwards to focus on music. Although sometimes physically I might have been a little tired or a lot tired from
Hmm.
that job. It was definitely easier than the bartending job, where I felt very fatigued mentally after I was finished, for some reason, which I thought was very interesting.
Kind of like that introvert, extrovert recovery. Like when you're amongst a crowd of people, you're feeding on that energy, and it does, it wears a person out. So there's
Yeah,
not much creativity left without some replenishment. That brings us to your writing. When you got that first gig of singing and you thought, man, I've got to start writing so I can contribute, what was that process like for you? Was it challenging? How did you inspire yourself?
yeah. I never really I never had a handbook. I never had anyone teach me about writing lyrics. I was always very cognizant of lyrics. I thank my mother for this, because she's an English major, and she was actually going to school for writing, and she's always loved writing. She's had a passion for literature and reading too, right? I mean, my parents, I had a really amazing childhood, and my parents and my grandmother, who I consider like a second mom to me, um, they would read endless amounts of books to us. Like my parents actually read the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy to me and my
Oh my
sister
goodness.
as a kid. So it was like there was a massive amount of reading that was absorbed, and I did a lot of reading too. And so I think that really helped. I've always been a lover of words and compositions of words and eloquent, writing. And so that, yeah, that really informed on my musical writing when it came about. I felt like I was prepared somehow, even though I'd never been taught about writing in the musical context. So yeah, so once I started diving into it, basically I would ask for musical material, because I wasn't writing like riffs, or that was left up to the other members of the band. In the first band that I was in, there was a fellow by the name of Mason West, and he was the guitar player. Actually, he was first the bass player and then the guitar player when we got a bass player in. And he was always good at coming up with riffs and ideas. I found over the years, and you learn this more and more as you get deeper into your writing process, but that certain people and certain compositions that they write will speak to you more than others.
Mhm.
uh, he was a guy where I enjoyed the compositions he came up with, and they sparked something within me. And that's always been my thing, where I've gotten a piece of music and that's kind of told me what to write. I don't know if everybody has this, and I feel fortunate that I have this, but yeah, a piece of music will just speak to me. It'll
Mhm.
just kind of whisper to you and go, I'm a ballad, or I'm a love song. And then from there, you kind of just sit with it, and yeah, and really kind of the lyrics just come to me in a way. If I just focus and play it, I think about other songs in a similar vibe that give me that energy, and then I'll go about writing something down, and then there's a lot of rewriting.
Mm.
Back in the day, um, the writing seemed to come easy, and I got very excited about things. And then you look back, as everyone does, and you go, "Well, that was actually not that good."
It
but
was easy because.
at the time, you're excited about it, and that's important, to be excited about your work all the way through, because you're going to write a wealth of stuff that, looking back, is not going to be your best work, but It's an important part of your creative process, and in getting to that level where you could consider yourself a good writer, a good lyric writer, you have to go through writing a bunch of songs that are that sort of beginner level of quality, in my opinion, anyway.
So do you essentially have a vault or diary full of stuff that never makes the cut, or that you maybe pull from later?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot, most of those early songs, I'm in awe of the musical or of the musicians that can write something at a very young age that stands the test of time. For me,
Yeah.
in my estimation, a lot of the stuff that I wrote back then was not was not of a quality that I would consider releasable by my
Mhm.
standards of today. Like, around the teenage years of writing, none of that stuff was up to par. And I don't know if it's just a difference in times, and things were so different back in the day when people were writing songs. But again, I don't even necessarily know if I agree with that. I think it might have been just me and my journey. It's taken me longer to get to that point of quality. Like, for example, Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, he wrote Dream On when he was 16.
Yeah.
None of the lyrics that I wrote at 16 would be able to hold a candle to that, right? So
Right.
um yeah.
So what would a show be like for someone that, has never seen your show before?
Dealer's choice, yeah.
Yeah.
We actually, it's interesting, the guitar player that I began talking with and eventually formed a band with, after my first band that became Broadway Bombshell, he's just recently been added to Dealer's Choice. He's been on his own musical journey over the years, and now we've actually added him to our roster. I think early July was our first show that we played with him. And so yeah, we have a more dynamic stage show now. We've got two guitar players, bass player, piano player, and obviously a drummer and myself. I'm able to run around and do the whole frontman thing now that we have another guitar player. But because before him, I was doing the lead playing as well. I was on guitar and I was doing the lead duties as well as the frontman duties. And so I find it very nice to be able to run around now with a wireless microphone and kind of be the front man and entertain the crowd while we have our guitar player. So yeah, it's a very dynamic classic rock um, set. We're very 70s influenced. We have a strong piano element, very energetic on stage. Me and Carl, the guitar player, do a lot of running around and entertaining. And there's the classic 70s drum solos, and instrument highlights, and everyone has a moment. And
Mhm.
yeah, just you're gonna hear really good classic rock songs. We take our writing, we pride ourselves in our writing. We take our writing very seriously. We don't take ourselves very seriously, but we take the music very seriously. And so for us, it's all about the song. You're going to hear very well formed songs. It's not about jamming and having the songs be secondary. It's about the songs first and foremost, and the jamming and the performance comes secondary to those songs. We find it very important because after all of that dies away, and after the experience, and you get that nostalgia of going to this 70s rock and roll show, eventually all you're going to be left with is the songs, and it's the songs that are going to need to be able to stand up to everything else.
Now I'm assuming, but can you play the piano as well?
I do play the piano a little bit.
Okay.
Yep. Although we do have a piano player, I do. Actually, that was one of the things I did over the pandemic. Was I I worked on my piano playing a little bit because I wanted to be able to do that as well as be able to do a little bit of guitar and obviously the vocals.
Okay. And what's publishing your music like for you? You're signed independent completely, or a hybrid of sorts? What's it like?
Yeah, so right now we're not signed to a label. We have a manager, and he has a distribution company that he
Okay.
works with called Symphonic Distribution. I believe they're based out of New York.
Okay.
They're they offer label services.
Okay.
So it's like you get the services of a label without being signed to them.
Okay.
Um, and so yeah, that was what he brought to the table. We haven't actually signed a contract with him yet, but I've been working with him, kind of co-managing the band for a couple months now. I met him at school. He was one of the teachers while I was going to school, and I kind of pitched
Okay.
him while in school, and he liked the project, so he's come on board.
So I love that there is there are more opportunities for artists, writers to take control and publish more than ever. What's something that you can speak on to that for those starting out that are feeling maybe like that's a secondhand option when it's not really anymore?
Sorry, which isn't an option?
The publishing, self-publishing, or being an independent artist, I feel like that's more powerful than ever. And I want to encourage people to take that as not to be second or a secondary alternative.
Right, right, absolutely. No, I mean, I think with a lot of things in the music industry, everything is kind of a double-edged sword, but there is so many benefits to that these days. There's so many resources, like I said, so many great books, podcasts, experiences to kind of connect with people who can shed some light on some processes. I would highly recommend that book, How to Make It in the New Music Business, by R. Hirschstand. That's just extremely informative. Puts it in some really basic layman's terms that everyone can understand. Um, yeah, our manager, he worked for one of his first gigs was worked for Virgin Records, which is a
Hmm.
subsidiary of Universal, I believe,
Hmm.
back in the late 90s, early 2000s. That was kind of the height of the music industry, record label music industry, where they controlled everything, and that was the way to make it, was to go through them. And then things have changed, and he went on to form one of the biggest indie labels out here in Canada after he left Virgin. Actually, he worked with them to form this new label called Arts and Crafts.
Hmm.
And they went on to break a band called Broken Social Scene, which was pretty big up here in Canada. And and so he's kind of been through it all. He's worked in the big record labels. He's worked in an indie label, and now he's doing management on his own. And and he's a big believer of the DIY, do it yourself approach. So I think it's very telling that someone like that, who's been through the industry, who's seen it all from the record label's point of view and otherwise, that he sees a viable option in this DIY way of doing things. You know, um, I think that's very telling, and he that's what he believes in. We're not looking for a record contract
Hmm.
right now. They record companies these days, because there's not as much money in it and things are a little leaner from the company's point of view. They're not looking to sign artists unless they're kind of sure about where they're going. They have a
Hmm.
bedrock of they have a fan base. They have some traction. They're already going places on their own.
Yeah.
If they do sign an artist that doesn't have that, they're not going to offer you much of a deal. They're going to be taking more from you, and you're going to be yeah, they're going to be taking more from you, and it's going to be more difficult for you to get a good deal as an artist
Yeah.
than if you're already established. So the idea is to work on your careers yourself, do it the DIY way, and then wait, and then maybe get a record deal when you're at that point where you're ready for it, but not to settle for some lesser deal because you're not
Yeah.
at that point yet, right?
Yeah. Very good. I love that.
Yeah.
What's one of your favorite things to do as a band together? Do you have a favorite pizza place to go to or something, or do you even gel much outside of being on stage?
Yeah, it's I think with every band, and this is just a guess because I haven't really delved. I should really ask more bands about this because I'm curious too. For me, it's the human element and how people interact with each other in a band. I'm very fascinated about myself, and I'm always gleaning new insights from my band that I can, kind of take forward to any new projects or just for other people who ask for advice. Um, we we hang out a lot, kind of just within the context of our musical collaborations. Outside of that, there's still some places we go out here in Chilliwack that we like to hang out. Just like our each of our places, bands, dad's place is like it's always been. We used to jam there when we started, and although we don't jam there anymore, we have a different jam space. A lot of the times, if we have a hangout, it'll be there. That's kind of like the central spot still for us all. Um, is our drummer's dad's place. We call it the Paradise. Yeah,
Cool.
but yeah, I feel like the dynamics of a band change over time. Like we were hanging
Yeah.
out. I feel like we were hanging out a lot more together at the beginning, and now we feel a little more fractured, although we still get along. things change over a period of time. We've been together for 3 years. The dynamic has definitely changed. Some
Hmm.
people who maybe hung out together at the beginning or don't hang out as much now, and maybe the other guys that weren't hanging out are now hanging out. So things
Hmm.
change over a period of time. But yeah, we like to go to the lake in the summertime. It's very beautiful up here. So Cultus Lake is one of the places near Chilliwack that we go to kind of hang out in the summertime. And
Be inspired.
yeah, definitely being outside is a big inspiration for me. Yeah, just being in nature.
So when's your next show? Where can people learn more about you?
Great. So yeah, we're on all social media, pretty much for Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Dealer's Choice Band on Instagram. The website is dealerschoice.xyz. You can find lots of info on there. We don't have a next show booked right now. We're kind of in between shows. We're working on a music video for The Gunslinger, which is our latest single. Just came out last Friday. So that we're doing a music video for that. It's very exciting. It's going to be a Western themed music video. Kind of obviously the Gunslinger kind of brings up image of Western. So yeah, that's what we're working on right now. We're planning a show in February, early February. It's going to be the third of 3 shows we've been curating. It goes under the moniker "An Evening of with Dealer's Choice and Friends," which is basically just us and 2 other acts. Very dynamic shows, trying to bring the art of classic performance and songwriting back, 70s flavor. Really engaging the audience, making them a part of the show. Very theatrical and over the top evenings. So stay
Nice.
tuned for that for any of you Vancouverites looking for a rock and roll show.
Yes, very cool. Well, thank you so much for connecting and for sharing your music with me, and come back anytime.
Oh, thank you so much, Trina. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Have a great one.
You too.